we stick with UFC 287. But this is why, to the point you raised about the co-main, why it could be ultimately in Miami is that the co-main will be what we believe is Gilbert Burns returning against Jorge Masvidal. Of course, both guys train out of and live in the Miami area. BC, if they actually do end up making this fight, and by the way, UFC President Dana White announced it, but I'm saying it goes through, what does this fight mean for each competitor, and what does the result mean for the division?
Given their stature, given the huge win Gilbert Burns had in terms of staying in line in contendership because he was unable to land bigger opponents yet, dude, he mopped up on Neil Magny. I think obviously from a distance you go, okay, this is a celebrity pseudo number one contender fight. And if we are going to have visions of potentially inserting Masvidal back into a title fight, which I believe could only truly happen if Edwards is the defending champion at that point, given their history, I like that the UFC essentially comes out and says, all right, we can't just do it on name power alone anymore. You already had two of those, right? We got to go in the direction of you got to beat a top guy. I think my biggest question, separate from Gilbert, we know what Gilbert wants, Luke. He wins this fight, he's going to get what he wants. He's either going to get a title shot or the biggest possible crossover name available to him. My question is, why did Masvidal accept this when every single person's reaction to this fight was, damn, Masvidal's going to get his ass kicked. And that doesn't mean that's what's going to play out. And Masvidal's very capable. And, this is why we watch the fights at the end of the day. But Luke, why is Masvidal doing this? He's already had 2 title shots. I don't see him at this age anymore as somebody that is caught up on the idea that I've got one more run in me. I think he's now a contracted hitman who's looking like Gilbert was during the last season of trying to find the biggest name possible for the most amount of money. Obviously, he beats Gilbert. Dude, he could get anybody. But is that worth the risk right now for Jorge?
Yeah. Who else would he fight? And take out Conor because they're not going to make that Conor fight with him. So Conor's not on the table. Nate Diaz not on the table. Who does, if he's not fighting Gilbert Burns, to get anywhere approximating what Jorge Masvidal would want, which is, to be as relevant as possible, but more than likely more well paid. Something of an action fight, if at all possible. That's what he's looking for. So who would it be, BC? Because Kamaru's fighting Leon. Colby, they're not going to do. They just did it. Hamzat we don't even know if he's going to be in this weight class. Then there's Bilal. Jorge is not taking that. Gilbert's sitting at 5. Wonderboy, he already fought and lost. And by the way, that fight, granted, that was before his renaissance, but that was one-sided. Jeff Neal, he's already got a date with Shavkat. Then you have Sean Brady. I don't think that
right. And just to be fair, you're getting to the level of names where the money's not going to be the same. So I get that.
Right.
This is a pay-per-view co-main event in Miami.
To answer the question, hold on, and I'll finish it just very quickly. It's Sean Brady, Vicente Luque, and then Shavkat Rakhmonov sitting at 10. Masvidal sitting at 11. First of all, this is inside the top 5 as an opponent. And secondly, this is the best it's going to get for Jorge given the circumstances. To your point, he's 38. I believe Gilbert is 36. So Gilbert not exactly young, but he does have a little bit of a youth advantage. I also think he's got fewer competitive MMA miles on him. Relatively speaking, Jorge has been fighting in backyards quite literally for a while. So there's a lot of wear and tear on his body. But this fight is not a perfect fight for Jorge by any stretch. But if he loses and performs well, it's not great, it's bad, but it's not altogether a complete disaster. Moreover, it's a big enough name where if he does in fact win, it puts him back in that space where he does want to be to get those more marquee names, potentially a Conor fight or whoever comes out of this Leon and Kamaru thing. I guess we'll have to see how it all plays out. That's why. It's because this is a very imperfect fight for Jorge. But given the lay of the land, it's the very best one he's going to get at this point in time.
I guess I asked this under the premise of, did they tell him essentially that, look, your money fights at the moment are Conor and Leon if he has the belt. If you want either of those, we're going to need you to come back, get a win, and get a big one. So I guess I can understand it under that thinking for Jorge. Same thinking you mentioned where, look, he's not going to go fight Hamzat or Shavkat or, he's not going to do that right now, okay? Maybe he looks at Gilbert's age, the fact that Gilbert was lured into a brawl against Hamzat and is just hoping Gilbert's not going to take him down and try to submit him. And I know Jorge's got defense for that, but I guess you're right. If you want big opportunities, you got to win big fights to get there. But odds wise, have they installed the odds yet, Luke? Because they got to be aggressively in the direction of
good question. Let me look that up right now. Let's see here for Jorge Masvidal.
And
By
I'm
the way,
not saying
BC
Jorge's scared of anybody. I'm sure he looks at Gilbert and goes, okay, I see my potential angle of victory. I just don't know if we see that, Luke.
Okay, I'm not going to give you the place. I'll just give you a rough approximation of what it looks like. It's roughly minus 500 for Gilbert Burns, plus 400 for Jorge. It's an uphill climb. It's an uphill climb. Let's just be very honest about that. He can do it, but it's an uphill climb.
Would you advise him to do a unique training camp for this one and go back to the same forest in Central America where he went to that reality show, took the year-plus break of his career, and woke up one day and decided it's time to start baptizing fools? Luke, can lightning strike twice in the same location?
Unlikely. I mean, you ever break up with someone, BC, and then you're apart from them for a while, and then you're like, you know what, I really miss them, and then you get back together and you're like, yeah, that was probably a mistake. Like, it was a good thing we had that moment in time, but I can't use this to recapture magic. The magic was that time, and that time.
Luke, to respond to that, there's this weird phenomenon that happened in my single dating life where anyone that broke up with me wasn't looking to get back together with me. I don't know what happened, Luke. So no, I've never done that, to be honest with you.
I've only had it happen a couple of times, and both times it was done, I was like, yeah, that was nah.
Yeah. It's not them, Luke. It's me. Okay, let's be fair about that.
Yeah, and that I can believe. But to the point you raised, it's like the fight is. This is what you're basically getting at, and I think you're 100% right. It's like, dude, this is it's a tough ass fight, and Gilbert is popular, but he's not like the biggest name in the division. He's certainly a big name, a respectable name, but not a huge name. Why the hell would you take this? And the answer is, given his other options, I'm not sure what the better option. I mean, I guess he could fool around at 185 or something. But dude, he's like, what was it, 3-fight losing streak he's on? This would be a fourth.
I'm wondering if he realized after negotiating that he has to win this fight to get a chance at those two money fights I mentioned. But Luke, I want to ask you this quickly here, and we're gonna have time to break this fight down ad nauseum. But do you think Jorge looks at Gilbert compared to the two wrestle heavy elites that he most recently fought in this division, Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman, and says to himself, even though Gilbert's submission game is off the charts, he won't be as consistent of a takedown threat of those other two. And if I fought those other two and, I didn't win, but, here I am still standing, I'll take that risk against Gilbert that I can try to stuff those takedowns.
I do think so. I think he probably feels like on the feet, if it stays there, I'll win. And he is good on the ground and he can wrestle, but it's not like the Colby all over you kind of wrestle. You could probably, fight through a lot of that more nimbly than, and by the way, fighting Colby is a good setup in the event that Gilbert wants to wrestle, right? Like you have that experience. Now, whether any of that actually proves to be true or how true it is remains to be seen, but I could understand that. Still, even with that, the counter I would have, the devil's advocate would be like, well, Gilbert can wrestle really well. He can definitely wrestle really well in a 3-round contest, which is probably what that's going to be. And his submission game is, they don't come much better. And plus, he can strike his ass off too, by the way. Like the idea that Jorge is automatically going to chew him up on the feet, I'm not so sure how true that is. I think Jorge at his best has been better, but I don't even know what the state of things currently would be, So
look, the only other matchup I would have said style-wise could have been good for him, and I want to know if you agree with this, is Belal Muhammad. Do you agree that that's the best potential top 5 matchup for Jorge at the moment? Stylistic.
No, Belal's a horrible matchup for him. Why would that be a good matchup?
I mean, Belal's going to put on the pressure and the striking. Why? You think Belal dominates him on the ground?
I don't think so. Belal Muhammad is a guy that I've been wrong about a fair number of times.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd favor him to win that fight. I'm just wondering stylistically.
Yeah, like, dude, if Belal and Jorge fought, I'm picking Belal. Like, maybe I wouldn't have 2 years ago or something, but I definitely would now. So one of the things that's really impressive about Belal, the fans don't like it, but you can see it just absolutely crushes his opponents, is, he might strike a little bit on the feet, but once he begins to establish wrestling contact, he does chain stuff together, right? He's constantly just on you. He is like mosquitoes in a swamp. Like, he just doesn't let go. And he doesn't all the time drown you or put on something flashy. But once he begins that process of wrist control and underhooking and level changing and pressing against the fence and switching to the ankles and blah, blah, blah. Once that process gets going, dude, it just doesn't really fucking stop. And these guys have a hard time dealing with it. And I think Jorge at 38 Even though, by the way, Jorge is a good defensive wrestler and is a very good grappler, but at 38 against a guy like that, that's a bad matchup for him. I don't like that at all. No.
All right. I put out the possibilities, Luke, and then you play whack-a-mole on whatever one you want. I just wanted to know, really, at the end of the day, does Bilal Muhammad have the best rack in MMA in terms of male fighters, in terms of developed
I gotta say,
pectorals?
his pecs are legitimate. I mean, those things are legitimate. That's just God-given
I mean, if
genetics.
you could take his pecs with Ian Heinish's back, do you have the perfect man, Luke? I mean, we really have that point.
You know who I would need. I'll tell you. So you take Bilal's pecs, you take the traps of Dalka Lungi and Bula. You seen that fella's traps? Holy shit, he can't walk through a normal door.
Yo, I know that dude. Yeah, he wears green trunks all the time. I know that guy, Luke.
He's got super fucking huge traps. And then the back of Big Francis's back. I've seen Francis in person a couple times. And by the way, they're saying Sean Brady. Sean Brady looks like he has... Dude, this is how fucking yoked Sean Brady is. Ready? If he turns to the side and you're not paying attention, it looks like he has bad posture. But he doesn't. He just has so much muscle tissue on his back that it almost bows him out a little bit. It's crazy how strong and muscular that dude is.
And well tattooed there. Well tattooed.
And very well tattooed, yes. All right, BC. By the way, before we move on from this topic, just lastly, where are we with Colby Covington? Because Hamza wanted that fight, and we thought we were going to get it. Then Gilbert calls for the fight, and we thought we were going to get it, or maybe they would push in that direction, and they're not. They're going to do something else with the Ultimate Fighter, which is something else I think he had potentially wanted. Where is Colby? I'm trying to sort of understand, by the time he makes his return to the division, whenever that is, will it already be too late? It does feel like he's being a little bit forgotten.
Okay, true. But if he has turned down fights, he has had no shortage, by the way, of people shouting his name, like you mentioned, Gilbert Burns included. I wonder if this is potentially strategic, because he does look at his situation, right? This is the tail end of his physical prime, his marketing peak as well. Just got a pay-per-view win over Jorge, so there's some sort of momentum. Luke, I think he's felt for some time that he has entered the celebrity fighter space, that he already did the work climbing the ladder, so he doesn't want to have to be thrown back into the mix. Whether you believe that or not, whether you believe he truly is a pay-per-view brand or he's achieved that sort of lofty status, I wonder if he's waiting on the results of the trilogy title fight, thinking in his mind here, I'm a fresh title foe for Leon Edwards and have the biggest name if he does beat Usman. That's really where I'm wondering there, because if that door closes, if Usman wins the belt back, okay, we're not going to a trilogy here against Colby. That's when Colby suddenly has to do the hard work again. That's when he's going to have to, potentially beat a Hamza, a Gilbert, or whoever. I wonder if right now this is a little bit about positioning and strategy in that regard.
That's a fair point. I don't have a better answer, so I'd let yours be the last word on that. It'll be curious. I'll be curious to see.
Guess the best way to answer that to me is this: if Edwards keeps his belt, and you're saying what's next, right away we're going to be talking about the winner of Jorge versus
Gilbert.
We're also going to be talking about where is Hamza in the two division equation. But the guy, again, coming off of a win in a pay-per-view main event will still be Colby Covington. So I think that sums it up,
Yeah, and obviously if Jorge loses to Gilbert, then that somewhat narrows the situation as well. So we'll have to see.